Have you ever noticed that sometimes, like, the most powerful move isn't actually throwing a punch?
Yeah.
It's making the other guy, like, too scared to even get in the ring with you.
Right, like a deterrent.
Exactly. That's kind of what we're diving into today. It's strategy number 10 from the 33 Strategies of War. It's called Creating a Threatening Presence, the deterrence strategy.
Okay. Interesting.
So we're going to unpack this idea from Robert Greene's book and see how true strength can actually mean not having to fight.
Okay, yeah. I'm intrigued.
Awesome. So let's start with the basics. Like, how does this whole threatening presence thing actually work?
Well, think about it this way. It's not always about having the biggest army or, being the loudest voice in the room.
Right.
It's about projecting an image of, well, danger, maybe a bit of unpredictability,
Okay.
and sometimes even invincibility. And it's all about preventing those challenges from ever popping up in the first place.
So it's like preemptive, like before they even think about messing with you.
Exactly.
Interesting. So it's not just about outward actions then. There's a mental game going on too.
No, absolutely. You're messing with their heads a bit.
Uh-huh.
Because fear, it can make people hesitate. It can make them doubt themselves. It can even create conflict within their own group.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let's get into a concrete example. How about the Cold War?
Perfect example. You've got the United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers staring each other down, each with enough nukes to wipe out the planet.
Right.
It was a very tense time.
Definitely. And like MAD, mutually assured destruction.
Right. The chilling logic of that, it was basically saying that if one side launches a nuke, well, the other side's going to retaliate.
And then everyone's toast.
Exactly. Complete annihilation.
Wow.
So that threat, that very real possibility, it acted as the ultimate deterrent.
No one wanted to push that button?
Right. It wasn't even about like who had more nukes or who was stronger. It was the shared understanding, the belief that both sides were willing to go all the way.
It was like a high-stakes poker game.
Yeah, a terrifying one. And the lesson here is, you can deter conflict if you convincingly show the other side that the cost of engaging is just way too high.
It's like, don't even think about it.
Exactly.
That's a powerful idea. And Greene says this isn't just limited to, like, global politics. It applies to all sorts of situations, right?
Yeah, definitely. Think about it. People generally try to avoid fights they know they're going to lose.
Right, of course.
So if you project that you're strong, capable, well, it's likely to lead to fewer direct confrontations.
Okay, so less conflict overall. What else?
Well, when people see strength, they tend to have more respect. It kind of naturally leads to them treating you differently.
More cautiously, maybe?
Yeah, and even with a bit of deference.
So that then leads to some level of psychological control.
Yeah, because you're making them think twice. They're not sure what you'll do. It forces them to be more cautious in how they interact with you.
Interesting. And we can see this in various fields, right? Like, think about the business world.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Amazon, right?
Right. Yeah, great example.
They're such a huge company, so dominant in so many areas.
It's almost intimidating.
Yeah. Like, it almost feels like smaller businesses wouldn't even bother trying to compete directly with them.
Right, and that's part of their strategy, right? Their sheer size, the resources they have, how aggressively they've entered markets.
Yeah.
It creates this huge deterrent for anyone else thinking of getting involved.
Okay, so what you're saying is, even though, like, a smaller business can't be Amazon,
Right.
maybe they can still cultivate that same deterrent in their own niche.
Exactly. Maybe they become known for having the absolute lowest prices or like the most amazing customer service, something that sets them apart.
That's a good point. And we see this in leadership too, right? Throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
Powerful leaders using this idea of projected power to keep rivals in check.
Totally. Whether it's through like military might or forming strategic alliances, even just cultivating this aura of authority. It's all about creating that image that they're not to be messed with.
Okay, and this could even play out in our own personal lives, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about like armies and corporations. Think about someone who walks around with confidence, who knows their boundaries and isn't afraid to set them.
Yeah.
They're less likely to be taken advantage of because other people can sense that inner strength.
They're not looking for an easy target.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a more modern example.
Okay, sure.
How about Elon Musk?
Oh, interesting.
Now, love him or hate him,
Right.
he definitely uses this kind of strategy. What do you think?
Yeah, I see that. He has this like total belief in his own vision, right?
Right.
And he wants to disrupt entire industries.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't care about conventional wisdom.
And that makes him unpredictable.
Exactly. And it keeps everyone guessing. Like, what's he going to do next?
Right. And it makes his competitors, or even just people who doubt him, think twice before going up against him.
Totally.
I mean, look at Tesla. They totally changed the car industry. SpaceX, revolutionizing space travel.
And then the really out there stuff like Neuralink.
Right. And these aren't just small side projects. They're huge, public, ambitious ventures.
And they build this reputation that he's not afraid of anything, of taking on these huge challenges and succeeding.
Even when people think he's crazy.
Right. And that reinforces the idea that if people truly believe in your ability to achieve the seemingly impossible,
They're going to think twice before challenging you.
yeah, it creates this perception of invincibility, even if it's not totally real.
Okay, so how can someone actually build this image of strength? You can't just walk around saying, I'm powerful, fear me.
No, definitely not. It's much more subtle than that.
So what is it?
It's about consistent actions, showing your confidence and your resolve, even in small things.
All right.
You need to cultivate a persona of confidence and capability. It should just be your natural way of being.
I see. And Greene talks about how dangerous it is to show weakness.
Yeah, because it's like an invitation for others to test you, to see how far they can push you.
It's like you're saying, hey, come pick on me.
Right. You never want to appear vulnerable or indecisive or easily intimidated, because people will notice that. They'll see it as a weakness and exploit it.
So you need to project this image that any attempt to challenge you will be met with strong resistance.
So that it's just not worth the effort.
Like picking a fight with a grizzly bear.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to win.
Okay, this reminds me of another great historical example. Genghis Khan.
Oh, yeah, the Mongol leader.
His name alone terrified people.
Oh, totally. And it wasn't just by chance. His armies were incredibly strategic.
How so?
Well, before they even arrived at a city or a settlement, they'd start spreading rumors. Stories about their brutality, how ruthlessly they crushed their enemies.
So it was like psychological warfare.
Absolutely. And a lot of those stories were probably exaggerated.
But they worked.
Oh, yeah. Because people would be so terrified, so convinced of the Mongols' power and brutality that they'd just surrender without a fight. Fear alone won them countless battles, secured entire territory.
It's a pretty stark example of how fear itself can be a weapon.
A very effective one.
But, and I think this is important, you can't just rely on bluff and bluster, right?
No, that's a good point. You can't project strength that isn't there. You can't overplay your hand.
Because eventually someone's going to call your bluff.
Exactly. If your perceived strength is just a facade.
A fake.
Yeah, and people figure it out, well, that can backfire big time.
You lose all credibility.
And you might invite even more challengers.
So you need to be able to back up your reputation with action when it's necessary.
Yeah, it can't just be an empty threat.
It's like that saying, all bark and no bite.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's look at a cautionary tale here.
Sure.
Saddam Hussein. He built this image of immense power.
Oh, yeah. Both within Iraq and on the world stage.
And he used fear to control people for a long time.
Right.
But when the U.S. invaded, it exposed the limits of that perceived power. His military wasn't as strong as everyone thought.
Exactly. His image crumbled when it was really tested.
So that's the lesson, right? If your image of strength isn't based in reality.
It's going to collapse eventually.
Yeah.
And the gap between perception and reality can have huge consequences.
Okay, so let's bring this back to our listeners. How can they apply this strategy in their own lives without, becoming a dictator or something?
Right. Good point.
So practical tips.
Well, first, it starts with building a genuine reputation for being good at what you do.
Okay.
Being competent and reliable. People respect that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's also about how you present yourself.
Yeah, your body language, speaking with confidence, even just maintaining eye contact.
It's about projecting self-assurance.
Exactly, because people pick up on those cues. If you seem unsure of yourself or nervous, people will notice.
And then they might try to take advantage.
Right, but if you project confidence...
They'll be less likely to mess with you.
Yeah, it's like you're sending a signal that you're not an easy target.
Okay, and Greene also talks about the power of letting others speak for you.
Oh, that's a really good point. It's more effective if your reputation comes from other people, not just yourself.
That's like getting a recommendation.
Exactly. People are more likely to believe it if it's coming from someone else.
Okay, and then there's unpredictability.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. If people can't predict your next move, they're going to be more hesitant to challenge you.
It's like you're keeping them on their toes.
Right, because they don't know what to expect, so they're more likely to be cautious.
Okay, so it's like a mix of things then. Building a solid reputation, projecting confidence, being a little unpredictable.
And when you are challenged, you need to respond decisively. Show that your strength is real.
Not just the bluff.
Exactly.
Okay, let's look at one more modern example. How about Apple?
Okay, yeah.
They have this incredibly strong brand image.
Almost untouchable.
Right. And it's not just about their products. It's their brand loyalty, their resources, how everything they do is so tightly integrated.
It's like a fortress.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates this huge barrier for their competitors.
Right, like why even bother trying to compete directly with them?
It's too much effort, too much risk.
Exactly, so they focus their energy elsewhere.
So the main takeaway here is that true power isn't always about winning every fight.
Yeah.
It's about strategically cultivating this image, this presence that deters people from even challenging you in the first place.
And that's something to think about, right? For our listeners, are you projecting strength and capability in your own life? Or are you unintentionally signaling weakness?
That's a great question.
It's worth considering how we can use these principles to create that deterrent effect. Ethically, of course.
Without being a jerk.
Right.
So to wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaway is really understanding the power of creating a threatening presence. It's about strategically shaping how people see you, so you can avoid unnecessary conflict.
Right.
And with that, we'll leave you with this final thought. In what areas of your life could cultivating an image of strength actually lead to fewer battles and a greater sense of control?
It's something to think about.